Okay, so the first question comes from ESP, and he asks, have there been times where you punked out of an approach and it fucked up your whole day? I punk out some days, and no matter how many girls I approach later on that day, it never makes up for the failure feeling I get. Not only that, I go as far as not texting a number I get because I didn't earn my boss badge that day. Are there any ways to ignore this emotion or things to say to yourself to get over it and move on? I approach maybe 5 girls a day on average. Okay, so to answer your first question of whether or not it's ever happened to me, the answer is yes. It used to happen to me all the time, and honestly it still happens to me sometimes today. The only difference now is I know how to turn those off days into more productive days. I mean, let's face it, we all have days where we punk out, but don't worry, because there are ways to fix this. One way to turn your bad day into a good day is by calling yourself out. The first time you make an excuse to not talk to a girl, push yourself to approach her, even though every muscle in your body is pulling you in the opposite direction. Don't think about whether or not you're going to succeed when you approach that girl. Think about the principle behind not letting yourself get away with that excuse you made up to not talk to her in the first place. There have been times where I pussed out and I've made an excuse to let a girl walk by me. To counter the fact that I just pussed out, I would run after her even if she was a block down the street, because I knew that if I talked to her, then that would help me, 1, overcome my fears, and 2, save that shitty day. Another way to turn your day around is by finding out what gets you into God mode. And in my opinion, I think that's the best way that you can turn your bad days into good days. Once you find out what gets you into God mode, it's a lot easier to get you out of that funk. Think back to one of those days that you were unstoppable and nothing can ruin your day. If a girl rejected you on that day, you probably wouldn't care that you were denied at that moment because you were having such a good day. And that's the mindset that you should have every time you go out to talk to girls. Everyone has a different way of getting into God mode. You just have to find out what your way is. And the only way you're going to find it is by going out more and more. You're not going to find the way you personally get into God mode by any book or article that you read. Blazin asks, I'm pretty interested to see how you could go for a makeout during the day. How do you have made out with the girl? Also, as you said, your vocals wasn't as good in the start. When you guys stopped, your energy actually went up. So the question, is how would you make out with a girl during the day? When it comes to makeouts during the day, in my experience, the first thing you need to know is basically it's not going to be as easy as those attempts that you do at night. Makeouts during the day require a much stronger connection than the simple, I love your face, blah, makeouts that you get at night. I mean, it could take you anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour, depending upon how fast you get to know them or how risky you want to play your cards. In this interaction, I felt that she was interested in me enough to go for the makeout, but obviously, as you saw, it failed. What I did wrong here, though, was that I didn't try to approach it from a different angle. I basically just gave up. I should have tried spinning her and then going for another makeout. I could have, started waltzing with her and then gone for another makeout. I could have just had normal conversation with her, just with really romantic eye contact, just that sexual tension. But I didn't do any of that. I just let her walk away. I basically took the route, which is giving me a 0% chance of getting that makeout. Keep in mind that even if you try one of the infinite amount of different ways that you can make out with a girl during the day, it's always better than doing nothing. Adriano asks, last week I had this girl smiling to my attempts to hold her hand and stuff, but she always let it go and saying that she didn't like the moving too fast thing. So I stepped back and then repeated the same move again, but she kept the pattern, smiling but hesitating. And to the point she got frustrated by me not really going forward, and I totally turned her body language to a bad state. Basically, by following this 2-step forward rule, I should try a hug, sniff her hair, kiss neck at this point, or even go for the kiss right after the first holding hands and hesitating from her. Okay, so basically you're asking, should you just progress even though she's hesitating? I mean, I wasn't there, so I don't know exactly how she was responding to you trying to hold her hand. These are the types of things that you have to gauge. I would say yes, if she's hesitating but she seems like she's really into you, then yes, try pushing it a little forward and see how it goes. But one thing that I noticed here that you said that I didn't particularly like was that you did the same thing over and over. If you do the same thing over and over, she's going to react the same way over and over. When you take those 2 steps forward, you need to take those 2 steps from a different angle. Think about all the different angles that we take when we try to make out with a girl. You should be doing the same thing when you're trying to hold her hand. You got to try every single different approach you can think of until one hits. Let's say she's not down to hold hands right off the bat. You can make it playful by playing hot hands. You can say you're going to read her palm. That's another good reason just to hold her hand and then just look at it. Start fake reading it. That makes it exciting. One of my favorites is just putting both my hands out, palms up, and saying, let me see your hands. I'm going to get to know you extremely well right now. So she just sets her hands upon mine, and I hold them there. And I just ask her stupid questions like, what's your favorite color? Basically, try different things to keep her on her toes and keep that interesting aspect in the conversation. I mean, if you do the same thing over and over, one, it's boring because you look like a one-trick pony, and two, it's only going to solidify her initial hesitation. Chez asks, because of work, I have to see this girl that I've been rejected by on a daily basis. Now, as someone just starting out and whose core is admittedly not very strong, it's awkward having to deal with them afterwards. For newbies in a similar situation, isn't it better to not hit on girls that you're going to see every day and just befriend them instead and to mainly approach the girls that you don't see daily? Or am I wrong? First of all, I want to say awesome. I love the fact that you actually hit on a girl at work. That's ballsy. It's not the easiest thing to do, so kudos to you. Secondly, I do want to also state that it is very doable though to hit on a girl at work and have it be successful. I don't want you to sell yourself short just because you're afraid that someone might find out about you asking a girl out on a date. And on to your question, the answer is yes. It is better to befriend them at first if you aren't experienced enough to get them to go out with you first, or you're uncomfortable with the rejection. I would suggest going to bars or clubs and refining your game a little bit. Practice in public places where you will never see the people around you ever again. That way, if you do get rejected, you're more comfortable with the fact that you just got rejected because you can logically convince yourself that it doesn't matter. Like, the people around you will never see you again. So who cares? And obviously, the better you get in public, the better you'll be when you try this at work. The only reason I would be cautious of hitting on girls at work is because, number one is obviously sexual harassment, and two, there's other restrictions that, could get you into trouble. For example, I worked at AMC, and if a girl was a different rank from me, then I couldn't date her. That's a really stupid rule. I don't know why that was. Just use your common sense. Don't go up to a girl and say, I love your face, and then just start trying to make out with her. Not gonna work. The bottom line is, if you're scared of some people finding out about you asking a girl out, or you're afraid that you're gonna have to see this girl again if she denies you, then you're not ready to be hitting on girls at work yet. Just keep practicing in public places until you've completely lost all those fears or you've gotten comfortable with rejection. Bronze asks, how do you keep approaching random girls on your campus without looking desperate or being known for doing that? Especially during lunch, I usually find a girl in the cafeteria eating by themselves, so I go eat with them. But since this is where I eat 3 days of the week, I'm sure there are people that eat there all the time that know what I'm up to. Listen, your school has thousands and thousands of different people eating in different areas every day. You are never gonna look desperate for hitting on girls. In fact, it's the exact opposite, and you're gonna look like a boss. If a guy sees you hitting on a girl every day, then he's just gonna be envious of your massive balls that are hanging in your pants. If a girl sees you hitting on multiple girls, then who gives a fuck? Just move on to the next one. If she doesn't like it, then screw her. But just a side note, you'll be surprised at how many girls actually think that you're just a friendly guy for talking to so many different people. So it's actually seen as a positive thing. And lastly, if you happen to run into a girl that you've already hit on in the past, then there's always room for, round 2 or even 3. Natural asks, how much should you use statements before you can start asking personal questions or create connection? Basically, when it comes to making statements versus asking questions, you just have to find that happy medium between the two. Figure out what works best for yourself and your own style of game. You should never only make statements the same way you should never only ask questions. Personally, I use statements when I feel like the conversation is getting a little bit too serious or too far into interview mode. And I like to use serious questions like, are you single, when I feel like the conversation is getting a little bit too jokey. At the end of the day, you have to gauge it. And the best way to find out when you should use a question versus when to make a statement is by going out more often. Jax Raycaster asks, I have a real problem. My hands tend to sweat a lot for no reason and I can't control it. I find it very hard to get physical with women, holding hands, touching their face, etc. because of this. How can I get physical while my hands are sweating? Honestly, this just comes from being nervous. And the more girls you talk to and the more comfortable you get talking to girls, the less sweaty your palms will get. And I'm telling you this through experience, not just bullshit. The way I used to deal with it was I would wipe my hands on my jeans before every time I'd talk to a girl because I didn't want to shake her hand and have her notice how nervous I really was. Trust me, the more comfortable you get with girls, the less you'll have to deal with this problem. Evan asks, one part that you skipped over in the breakdown, I think, was when she asked you if you approach a lot of girls. You said that you don't do that often. Would you say that this was a mistake, or this is how you usually handle this question? Or shit test if you look at it that way. I've always believed in being unapologetically honest with this question, but would like a different perspective. Honestly, you could deal with this situation either way. Both works fine. It kind of just depends upon your personality. To answer your question, no, that wasn't a mistake. That is how I answer that question. Because I have a very forward personality, girls tend to realize pretty early that they probably aren't the first and only girl that I talked to that day. So they frequently ask me that question of, do you do this often? Do you talk to a lot of girls? I've come to realize that for me personally, telling them what they want to hear tends to work out better. So I just tell them, you know, you're the only girl I've talked to the entire day. And they'll believe it, they'll feel special, they move on from that question. In the past, I've used the unapologetically honest route. The way it turned out for me is usually they lose that spark that they initially had. Like, sure, there's the few girls that will be cool with the honesty, but most of them feel like they aren't as special anymore, and they feel like they're just another one of those girls that I hit on. Alright guys, well that's the end of this week's Q&A, and I will see you guys next week.